The dust had barely settled on Robert O'Brien's grave when Rebecca knew she would have to sell everything he had owned just to keep breathing another month. She stood in the small workshop behind their modest house on the edge of Porterville, California, her fingers trembling as they traced the worn wooden handles of tools that still carried the warmth of her husband's touch, though he had been cold in the ground for 3 weeks now. It was March of 1884, and the San Joaquin Valley stretched endless and golden beyond her property line, beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. Robert had loved this land, had worked himself to exhaustion trying to make their small ranch profitable, fixing fences and building sheds for neighbors to earn extra money when the cattle prices dropped. Then the fever had come, swift and merciless, and within 5 days she had gone from wife to widow at 24 years old. Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and began gathering the tools. The hammer with its smooth handle, darkened by years of her husband's sweat. The saw he had sharpened just days before falling ill. The level, the plane, the chisels arranged by size, the way Robert had always kept them. Each one was a memory, and each one had to go. She loaded them into a wooden crate, her movements mechanical. The bank had been patient, but patience only stretched so far. The mortgage payment was due in 10 days, and she had exactly $4.30 to her name. The small vegetable garden barely produced enough to feed her, and the 2 chickens Robert had bought last fall were hardly enough to sustain anyone. She had no family in California, no one to turn to. Her parents had died back in Missouri before she had married Robert and traveled west with hope burning bright in both their hearts. The general store in town served as an informal marketplace where people bought and sold goods. Rebecca hitched up their old mare, Daisy, to the wagon, loaded the crate of tools, and made the 3-mile journey into Porterville's dusty Main Street. The morning sun was already climbing high, promising another warm spring day. Inside the store, Mr. Hutchins looked at her with the kind of pity that made her spine stiffen. "Mrs. O'Brien," he said softly, "I heard about Robert. Terrible thing." "I need to sell these," Rebecca said, keeping her voice steady. "They are good tools, well maintained." Mr. Hutchins examined them with a practiced eye, running his thumb along the blade of the saw, testing the weight of the hammer. "I can give you $18 for the lot." Rebecca's heart sank. "These are worth at least $40. Robert paid more than that when he bought them." "That may be, but I have to make a profit too. And tools, well, there's not always a buyer right away." She wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but what choice did she have? "25, she said, hating the desperation in her own voice. Mr. Hutchins shook his head. "20, and that's being generous because I respected your husband." Rebecca felt something crack inside her chest, but she nodded. $20 plus the 4 she had at home would not cover the mortgage, but it might buy her time. She might be able to sell Daisy, though the thought made her sick. Without the horse, she would be truly stranded. She was about to accept when the bell above the door chimed and a man walked in. Rebecca had seen him around town a few times, always from a distance. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his dusty work shirt, and a face that seemed carved from sun-weathered stone. His dark brown hair curled slightly beneath his hat, and his eyes, she noticed, were a startling shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over the Sierra Nevada. "Morning, Silas," Mr. Hutchins said, his tone brightening. "What brings you in?" So this was Silas Quinn, the cowboy who worked at the Patterson Ranch north of town. Rebecca had heard the name, heard he was a hard worker who kept to himself mostly, saving his money for something though no one seemed to know what. Silas Quinn glanced at the crate of tools on the counter, then at Rebecca. His gaze was direct but not unkind. "These for sale?" he asked. Just settling on a price, Mr. Hutchins said quickly. Silas stepped closer, examining the tools with the same care Mr. Hutchins had shown, but there was something different in the way he handled them. Respectful. "These are quality," he said. "Someone took good care of them." "My husband," Rebecca heard herself say. "Robert O'Brien. He was particular about his tools." Recognition flickered in Silas's eyes. "I heard about your loss. I am sorry." Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak. There was something in his tone that sounded genuine, not like the practiced condolences she had received from others who were merely being polite. "What are you asking for them?" Silas directed the question to her, not to Mr. Hutchins. "I was offering $20, Mr. Hutchins interjected. "I was not asking you," Silas said, still looking at Rebecca. "Madam," Rebecca swallowed, "they are worth 40, but I need money now, not eventually." Silas nodded slowly. $40 is fair, I will give you 50. The words hung in the air like something impossible. Rebecca stared at him, certain she had misheard. $50, Silas confirmed. "These are well-maintained tools and they are worth that to someone who appreciates quality." Mr. Hutchins looked flustered. "Now hold on, Silas." "You do not need to. It is my money," Silas said calmly. He reached into his pocket and counted out $50 in bills and coins, placing them on the counter in front of Rebecca. "That is, if you are willing to sell them to me instead." Rebecca's hands shook as she reached for the money. It was more than she had hoped for, enough to make the mortgage payment and have something left over for supplies. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Yes, thank you." Silas gathered the tools back into the crate, lifting it easily. "Do you have a wagon outside, madam?" "Yes, but you do not need to. I will load them for you," he said simply. "Then I will take them over to the livery. Do you mind showing me where your wagon is?" Rebecca led him outside, her mind spinning. Why would a cowboy need a full set of carpentry tools? Most ranch hands, she knew, owned little more than what they could carry in a saddlebag. And why offer more than she asked? Silas loaded the crate into her wagon with careful precision, then turned to her. "Mrs. O'Brien, I want you to know I will take good care of these. Your husband clearly valued them." "I am sure you will," Rebecca managed to say. "Thank you again, Mr. Quinn." He tipped his hat to her. "Just Silas is fine, you take care now." She watched him walk toward the livery stable, carrying the crate that contained the last tangible pieces of her husband's work, and felt tears burning behind her eyes. At least, they had gone to someone who seemed to understand their value. That was something. Rebecca made the mortgage payment that afternoon, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders even as a new worry settled in. The money would not last forever. She needed to find work, some way to support herself. But in Porterville, jobs for respectable women were scarce. She could cook, clean, sew. Perhaps someone needed a housekeeper. 3 days passed. Rebecca tended her small garden, collected eggs from her chickens, and tried not to think about the empty workshop or the silence that filled her house. She was hanging laundry on the line behind her house when she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. She walked around to the front, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, and froze. Silas Quinn was climbing down from a wagon, and in the back was the crate of tools. Her tools. Robert's tools. "Mr. Quinn," she called out, confused. "Did you forget something?" Silas removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "No, madam, I came to return these." Rebecca felt her stomach drop. "Is something wrong with them? Did you find damage I did not notice?" "Nothing is wrong with them," Silas said quickly. "They are fine tools, just like I said." He hefted the crate and started toward her house. "Where would you like me to put them?" "I do not understand," Rebecca said, not moving. "You bought them. They are yours." Silas set the crate down on her porch and turned to face her. Up close, she could see the sun lines around his eyes, the slight crook in his nose that suggested it had been broken once. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I bought them because I could see you needed the money," he said finally. "And because that fool Hutchins was trying to cheat you, but I did not buy them to keep them. Your husband's tools should stay with his wife." Rebecca felt the world tilt slightly. "You gave me $50 for tools you never intended to keep." "Yes, madam, that is." She struggled to find words. "That is absurd. That is your money. You worked for that." "I did work for it," Silas agreed. "And I chose to spend it this way. You do not need to pay me back. Consider it a gift if you like." "I cannot accept charity," Rebecca said, her voice hardening. Pride was sometimes all she had left. "It is not charity," Silas said quietly. "It is one human being helping another who needs it. There is a difference." He gestured to the crate. "Besides, you might need these. You have a ranch here, buildings that will need repair, or you could sell them again later when you are not desperate and get a fair price." Rebecca stared at him, at this strange cowboy who had just given her $50 and expected nothing in return. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Silas was quiet for a moment. 5 years ago I was flat broke in Nevada, sick with pneumonia, figured I would die in some alley. A woman I never met before took me in, nursed me back to health, never asked for a thing, told me to pass it along when I could." He met her eyes. "I have been saving for my own place, but I have enough. You need it more right now." Tears spilled down Rebecca's cheeks before she could stop them. She turned away, embarrassed by her own emotion, but Silas did not move. "Thank you," she said, her voice rough. "I do not know what else to say. Just thank you." "You do not need to say anything," Silas replied. He started back toward his wagon, then paused. "If you need anything else, Mrs. O'Brien, any work done around the place, you let me know. I am good with my hands." Then he was gone, leaving Rebecca alone with a crate of tools and a heart that felt full and broken at the same time. That night, she lay in bed unable to sleep, thinking about gray-blue eyes and quiet kindness, thinking about a man who had given away $50 without a second thought. It had been so long since anyone had shown her such consideration without expecting something in return. Robert had been that kind of man, always helping neighbors, always giving. She had loved that about him. The guilt came then, swift and sharp. How could she be thinking about another man when Robert had been gone less than a month? What kind of wife was she? But in the darkness, alone, she admitted to herself that Silas Quinn had stirred something in her she thought had died with Robert. Not love, nothing so strong or clear. Just a small flicker of awareness, of interest. It frightened her. The next morning, Rebecca forced herself into routine. She weeded the garden, fed the chickens, swept the floors. She was drawing water from the well when she saw the wagon approaching again. Her heart jumped before she could stop it. But this time, Silas was not alone. An older woman sat beside him, plump and cheerful-looking, with gray-streaked brown hair tucked under a bonnet. "Mrs. O'Brien," Silas called out as he brought the wagon to a stop. "This is Martha Patterson. She runs the ranch where I work." Martha Patterson climbed down with surprising agility, smiling warmly at Rebecca. "Mrs. O'Brien, I am so sorry for your loss. Robert did some work for us last year, built a beautiful chicken coop. He was a good man." "Thank you," Rebecca said, bewildered by this visit. Martha got straight to the point. "Silas tells me you might be looking for work. My regular housekeeper's daughter just had a baby, and she is going to help her for the next few months. I need someone who can cook and clean, maybe help with some sewing. The pay is $20 a month plus meals. You could come daily or stay during the week, whatever suits you." Rebecca's mouth fell open. $20 a month. That would cover her mortgage and then some. Yes, I would be very interested." "Wonderful," Martha said, Can you start tomorrow? I will have Silas pick you up at dawn." "Yes, of course," Rebecca said quickly. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. Call me Martha. We are not formal at the ranch." She climbed back into the wagon, and Silas tipped his hat to Rebecca before driving away. Rebecca stood in her yard, trying to process what had just happened. Silas had given her the tools back, and now suddenly she had a job. It was too much of a coincidence. He had arranged this somehow, talked to Martha on her behalf. She should have been grateful. She was grateful. But part of her bristled at the idea of being a charity case, someone who needed rescuing. Still, pride would not pay her mortgage, and Martha seemed kind enough, genuine. That night, Rebecca pulled out her best dress, brushing away dust and mending a torn hem. She braided her auburn hair and pinned it up carefully. If she was going to work at the Patterson Ranch, she would present herself properly. Silas arrived exactly at dawn, driving a small buggy this time instead of a wagon. The early morning light gilded the valley in gold and purple, and the air was cool and sweet. "Morning," Silas said as Rebecca climbed up beside him. "Sleep well." "Well enough," Rebecca replied. She hesitated, then added, "Did you ask Mrs. Patterson to hire me?" Silas glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I mentioned you might be looking for work. Martha made her own decision. She needs the help and you need the job. Seemed like it could work out for both of you." "I do not need you to solve my problems," Rebecca said, more sharply than she intended. "I know that," Silas said calmly, "but there is no shame in accepting help when it is offered freely. We all need someone sometimes." Rebecca fell silent, watching the landscape roll past. Silas did not seem offended by her tone, which somehow made her feel worse. He was trying to help, and she was snapping at him like an ungrateful child. "I apologize," she said finally. "That was rude. I appreciate what you have done for me, truly." "No apology needed," Silas said. "I understand. You have had a hard month." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. The Patterson Ranch was larger than Rebecca had expected, with a sprawling main house, several barns, and corrals stretching into the distance. Cattle dotted the hills beyond, and she could see several ranch hands working near one of the barns. Martha greeted them at the house, whisking Rebecca inside to show her around. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, the bedrooms spacious and airy. "I have 4 ranch hands living in the bunkhouse, plus my husband Daniel and myself," Martha explained. "So that is 6 for meals, though sometimes we have visitors. Can you cook for that many?" "Yes, madam," Rebecca said. She had cooked for church socials before, had helped Robert's mother prepare meals for their large family back in Missouri. "Wonderful. And please call me Martha." She showed Rebecca the pantry, the storerooms, the linen closets. "The work is steady but not overwhelming. I will help when I can, but I have been running myself ragged trying to do it all. You are an answer to prayer, dear." Rebecca spent the day learning the routine of the house. She prepared lunch for the hands, serving beef stew and fresh bread. Silas came in with 3 other cowboys, all of them dusty and tired from a morning of work. He nodded to her but did not single her out, for which she was grateful. One of the other cowboys, a young man who could not have been more than 20, grinned at her. "This stew is better than anything we have had in months, Mrs. O'Brien." "Tommy, do not insult Martha's cooking," another hand said, laughing. "I am not insulting anyone, just stating facts," Tommy protested. Martha, coming in from the parlor, laughed. "I never claimed to be a great cook, boys." "You are lucky to have Mrs. O'Brien here." The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Rebecca washed dishes, swept floors, helped Martha with mending. It felt good to be useful, to have purpose beyond simply surviving. When the day ended and Silas drove her home, she was exhausted but more content than she had been in weeks. "You did well today," Silas said as they approached her house. Martha told me she is glad to have you. It feels good to work, Rebecca admitted, to be doing something besides grieving. Silas pulled the buggy to a stop in front of her house. Grief does not disappear just because you are busy, he said quietly. It is still there, but maybe it is easier to carry when you have other things to think about too. Rebecca looked at him, really looked at him. You sound like you speak from experience. Lost my wife and daughter 7 years ago, Silas said, his voice flat. Cholera. They died within a day of each other. The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Oh, Silas, I am so sorry, he shrugged, but she could see the tightness in his jaw. It was a long time ago. I am just saying I understand what you are going through, not exactly the same, but close enough. Is that why you? Rebecca trailed off, not sure how to finish the question. Why I helped you, Silas finished. Maybe partly. I remember how it felt to be alone, to have people look at you with pity instead of seeing you as a person. I hated that. I hate it too, Rebecca whispered. I know, Silas said. That is why I am trying not to do that to you. You are not broken, Mrs. O'Brien. You are just dealing with something hard. There is a difference. Rebecca felt tears prickling her eyes again. When had she become such a watering pot? Thank you, she managed, for understanding. Silas tipped his hat. I will see you tomorrow morning. Rebecca climbed down from the buggy and watched him drive away, her heart feeling strange and full. This complicated, quiet man who had lost everything and somehow found a way to keep living, to keep being kind. She wanted to know more about him, wanted to understand how he had survived his grief. Maybe he could teach her. The days settled into a rhythm. Silas picked her up each morning. They rode to the ranch in comfortable silence, and Rebecca worked alongside Martha. She cooked, cleaned, mended, and helped with whatever needed doing. The work was hard but satisfying, and Martha proved to be excellent company, funny and warm without being intrusive. Silas kept his distance during the day, focused on his work with the cattle and horses. But during their morning and evening rides, they talked. Small conversations at first about the weather, about the ranch, about nothing important. But gradually, they began to share more. Rebecca told him about Missouri, about meeting Robert at a church social, about their dreams of building something in California. Silas told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to rope cattle from his father, about the years he had spent drifting after losing his family. I did not think I would ever want to settle down again, Silas admitted one evening as they rode toward her house. Seemed easier to keep moving, not get attached to places or people. What changed? Rebecca asked. Nothing dramatic, Silas said. I just got tired, I think, tired of running. I have been working at Patterson's for 2 years now, saving money. I want my own place eventually, small ranch where I can run cattle, something to build. That sounds like a good dream, Rebecca said softly. What about you? Silas asked. What do you want now? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. I do not know, she finally admitted. I never thought about having to plan a future without Robert. We always talked about what we would do together. The ranch we would build, the children we would have. She swallowed hard. Now all those plans are gone, and I do not know what to replace them with. Maybe you do not need to replace them yet, Silas said. Maybe you just need to get through each day until you figure out what comes next. Is that what you did? For a long time, yes. And eventually I found new things to want, different dreams but still worth having. Rebecca pondered his words that night as she lay in bed. Different dreams. Could she imagine that? A life that was not the one she had planned with Robert, but something else entirely. The thought felt both terrifying and oddly exciting. Spring deepened into early summer. The valley grew warmer, the hills turning from green to gold. Rebecca had been working at the Patterson Ranch for nearly 2 months, and her life had taken on a new kind of normalcy. She still missed Robert with an ache that sometimes stole her breath, but the grief was no longer drowning her. She could breathe around it now, function despite it, and she was noticing things. Like the way Silas's face changed when he smiled, the rare moments when his serious expression broke into something warm and genuine. The way his hands moved with confidence and grace, whether he was handling horses or fixing a broken fence. The quiet strength in his presence. She tried to push these observations away, tried to convince herself it was too soon, too wrong. But her heart seemed to have its own ideas. One Saturday afternoon, Martha insisted Rebecca stay for supper instead of going home. "Daniel's brother is visiting, and I am making a proper feast," she said. "Besides, it is your birthday next week. Consider this an early celebration." Rebecca had forgotten her own birthday. She would turn 25 on June 15th, a milestone that now felt meaningless. But she agreed to stay, not wanting to disappoint Martha. The evening meal was indeed a feast, with roast chicken, potatoes, fresh vegetables from Martha's garden, and an apple pie that made Rebecca's mouth water. Daniel Patterson proved to be as warm as his wife, a barrel-chested man with laugh lines around his eyes. His brother, visiting from Sacramento, told stories about the city that had everyone at the table entertained. Silas sat across from Rebecca, mostly quiet but clearly enjoying himself. Once their eyes met and he smiled at her. Just a small smile, but it made her heart flutter in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. After dinner, Martha shooed everyone outside. "Go enjoy the evening while I clean up," she insisted. Rebecca tried to help, but Martha firmly pushed her toward the door. "You work hard enough. Go on." Outside, the sun was setting in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Rebecca walked toward the corral, drawn by the beauty of the horses silhouetted against the colorful sky. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning that it was Silas. "Beautiful evening," he said, leaning against the fence beside her. "It is," Rebecca agreed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the horses. "Martha told me it is your birthday next week," Silas said. "She should not have mentioned it," Rebecca said. "It does not feel like something worth celebrating this year." "Why not?" "Because Robert is not here to celebrate it with me." The words came out more bitter than she intended. Silas nodded slowly. "I understand that. First few years after Sarah and Emma died, I hated every holiday, every birthday. Felt wrong to celebrate anything when they were gone. Sarah and Emma. It was the first time he had spoken their names, and Rebecca felt honored by the trust implied in that. "How did you get past it?" "I realized they would not want me to stop living," Silas said quietly. "Sarah always loved celebrating everything, any excuse for cake and laughter. She would have been furious if she knew I was mourning instead of living, so I started trying to live again, not just survive." It is what she would have wanted. Rebecca felt tears on her cheeks. "Robert would have wanted that too. He hated seeing me sad." "Then maybe you owe it to him to try," Silas said gently. "Not to forget him. You will never forget him. But to let yourself have joy again when it comes." Rebecca turned to look at him fully. "Is that what you are doing? Letting yourself have joy again?" "I am trying," Silas said. His eyes were intense on hers. "It is not easy, but yes, I am trying." Something passed between them in that moment, something unspoken but powerful. Rebecca felt her breath catch, felt the air charge with possibility, then Silas stepped back, breaking the moment. "I should check on the horses," he said. "Good night, Mrs. O'Brien." "Rebecca," she said impulsively. "Please call me Rebecca." Silas smiled, that rare, warm smile that transformed his face. "Good night, Rebecca." She watched him walk away, her heart pounding. Something had shifted between them, something fundamental. And for the first time since Robert's death, she did not feel guilty about it, just alive. The next week passed in a haze of awareness. Every time Silas was near, Rebecca felt hyperconscious of him. The way he moved, the sound of his voice, the rare moments when their hands would accidentally brush and electricity would shoot up her arm. She wondered if he felt it too, this growing connection between them. Sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, but he never said anything, never crossed any lines. He remained respectful, friendly, nothing more. On her birthday, Martha surprised her with a small cake and presents from the ranch hands. Tommy had carved her a beautiful wooden spoon, and the other cowboys had pooled money to buy her a new apron. Martha gave her a shawl she had knitted herself, soft and warm. "You all did not need to do this," Rebecca protested, but she was touched by their kindness. "Of course we did," Martha said firmly. "You are part of our family now." Silas was the last to approach her. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This is not much," he said, looking almost nervous, "but I thought you might like it." Rebecca unwrapped the package to find a book, Poems by Emily Dickinson. She looked up at him in surprise. "How did you know I like poetry?" "I saw you reading a poetry book one evening when I dropped you off," Silas said. "Thought you might enjoy some new verses." Rebecca clutched the book to her chest, overwhelmed. It was such a thoughtful gift, chosen specifically for her. "Thank you, Silas. This is wonderful." That night, she read the poems by lamplight, and certain verses seemed to speak directly to her heart. "The heart asks pleasure first, and then excuse from pain," Dickinson wrote. Rebecca traced the words with her finger, thinking about Silas, about the way he made her feel alive again. Was she allowed to want this? Was it too soon? The answer came 2 weeks later, on an ordinary Thursday that became extraordinary. Rebecca was in the kitchen kneading bread when she heard shouting from outside. She ran to the window and saw several of the ranch hands gathered near the barn, gesturing urgently. Her heart seized. Someone was hurt. She ran outside, flour still dusting her hands, and pushed through the small crowd. Silas lay on the ground, his face pale, blood soaking through his shirt at the shoulder. "What happened?" Rebecca demanded, dropping to her knees beside him. "Horse spooked and threw him into the fence," Tommy said, his young face frightened. "Caught his shoulder on a nail." "We need the doctor," Rebecca said, her hands automatically moving to examine the wound. She had helped Robert with injuries before, knew basic first aid. The bleeding was bad but not arterial. "Someone ride to town." "Already sent Carl," one of the other hands said. Rebecca pressed her apron against Silas's shoulder, trying to stanch the bleeding. His eyes were open but glazed with pain. "You are going to be fine," she told him firmly. "Just stay still." "Rebecca," he managed, his voice weak. "Hush now, save your strength." Martha appeared with clean cloths and water. Together, they worked to clean the wound, and Rebecca was relieved to see it was deep but not as bad as she had feared. Silas remained conscious, teeth gritted against the pain but not crying out. "You are doing well," Rebecca murmured, her hand finding his and squeezing. "Hold on." Silas's fingers tightened around hers, not planning on going anywhere. The doctor arrived within an hour, examined Silas, and stitched up the wound. "You are lucky," he told Silas. "Couple inches to the left and this would have been much worse. You will be sore for a few weeks, but you will heal." They moved Silas to a bed in the house, and Martha insisted he stay there rather than going back to the bunkhouse. "You need proper rest and care," she said in a tone that brooked no argument. Rebecca volunteered to sit with him that night, and Martha gave her a knowing look but did not comment. Rebecca brought her mending and settled into a chair beside Silas's bed. He slept fitfully at first, occasionally groaning in pain. Rebecca dampened a cloth and wiped his forehead when he seemed feverish, adjusted his blankets, made sure he drank water when he woke. It felt natural to care for him this way, right in a way she could not quite articulate. Around midnight, Silas woke more fully. "Rebecca," he said, his voice rough, "you do not need to stay. I am fine." "You are not fine," Rebecca said gently. "You are injured. Let me help you." "You have done enough already," Silas said, but there was no heat in his words. "Thank you for earlier. You were calm when everyone else was panicking." "I learned from Robert," Rebecca said. "He was always getting cuts and scrapes working on things. I got good at patching him up." The memory came without the usual stab of pain, just a gentle sadness. "He was lucky to have you," Silas said quietly. "I was lucky to have him," Rebecca replied. She hesitated, then added, "But I am starting to think maybe I can be lucky again, in a different way." Silas's eyes met hers, and in the dim lamplight she saw understanding there and hope. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something." "You need to rest," she protested. "No, let me say this while I have the courage." Silas shifted, wincing at the movement. "These past months, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has been the best thing to happen to me in years. You make me want things I thought I could never want again." Rebecca's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Silas, I am not asking you for anything," he continued quickly. "I know it has not been long since Robert passed. I know you might not be ready. But I needed you to know that I care about you, more than I probably should." Rebecca stood and moved to sit on the edge of the bed, taking his uninjured hand in both of hers. "You should know something too," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I care about you. These feelings frighten me because they are so strong, so unexpected. I loved Robert deeply, and part of me will always love him. But he is gone and you are here, and when I am with you, I feel alive in a way I did not think I would ever feel again." Silas brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "We do not have to rush anything. I can wait as long as you need." "I do not want to wait," Rebecca said, surprising herself with her certainty. "Life is too short, too unpredictable. Robert's death taught me that. If there is a chance for happiness, I want to reach for it." "Rebecca," Silas breathed her name like a prayer. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," she said, and she was. This felt right, true, like something she had been moving toward without realizing it. Silas pulled her closer with his good arm, and Rebecca leaned down, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, both of them aware of the fragility of this new thing between them. But it was also full of promise, of hope, of a future neither of them had expected but both were willing to reach for. When they parted, Rebecca rested her forehead against his. "This is not just gratitude, is it?" she asked. "Because you helped me." "This is not gratitude," Silas assured her. "This is me falling in love with a strong, brave, beautiful woman who has been through hell and come out the other side still kind. That is not gratitude. That is just truth." Rebecca felt tears on her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I think I am falling in love with you too." They stayed like that for a long moment, forehead to forehead, breathing in sync. Then Silas yawned and Rebecca laughed softly. "You need to sleep," she said, standing. "We can talk more tomorrow." "Stay," Silas said, catching her hand. "Please, just sit with me." So Rebecca settled back into her chair, holding Silas's hand as he drifted off to sleep. And for the first time since Robert's death, she felt at peace. The grief was still there, would always be there in some form, but it no longer defined her. She was allowed to be happy again, to love again. Robert would have wanted that for her. As the night deepened, Rebecca thought about the strange path that had brought her here. The tragedy of Robert's death, the desperation that had forced her to sell his tools, and Silas's unexpected kindness in buying and returning them. If he had not done that, would they be here now? Would she have gotten to know him, to see past his quiet exterior to the good man beneath? Everything happened for a reason, people said. Rebecca did not know if she believed that. But she did believe in second chances, in the possibility of finding light after darkness. And Silas Quinn was her light. Silas recovered slowly over the next 2 weeks. Rebecca divided her time between her regular duties and caring for him, and Martha gave her knowing smiles but never said a word. The other ranch hands seemed to accept the growing relationship between their fellow cowboy and the widow, treating it as natural rather than scandalous. Daniel Patterson, however, did pull Rebecca aside one afternoon. "I want you to know I think highly of Silas," he said. "He is a good man, honest and hard-working, but I also know you have been through a lot. If you need time, do not let anyone pressure you." "I appreciate your concern," Rebecca said, "but this is not pressure. This is what I want." Daniel nodded, satisfied. "Then you have my blessing for what it is worth." As Silas regained his strength, they began taking walks together in the evenings, exploring the ranch land. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories, dreams, fears. Silas told her about his childhood in Texas, about his father's ranch and the hard lessons of growing up in a place where weakness could get you killed. He told her about meeting Sarah at a dance, about how shy she had been at first, how she had blossomed once they married. About Emma, their daughter, who had been only 3 when she died. "She loved flowers," Silas said, his voice thick with old grief. "Used to pick them constantly, brought them to Sarah in little fistfuls. Dandelions mostly, weeds really, but Sarah would put them in a jar like they were roses." Rebecca squeezed his hand. "They sound wonderful." "They were," Silas said, "and I will always love them, but I can love you too. My heart is big enough for both." "I feel the same way about Robert," Rebecca said. "Loving you does not diminish what I felt for him. It is just different, new." "New," Silas repeated, tasting the word. "I like that. We are building something new together." By August, Silas was fully healed and back to work. He and Rebecca had settled into a courtship that felt both exciting and comfortable. They did not hide their relationship, but neither did they make a public spectacle of it. In a small community like Porterville, everyone knew anyway. One evening, as Silas drove Rebecca home, he pulled the buggy to a stop overlooking the valley. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something," Silas said, suddenly serious. Rebecca's heart quickened. "What is it?" Silas took her hand. "I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards. But we are not traditional people in traditional circumstances. We have both loved and lost. We know how short life can be, how precious." He paused, then continued, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build that ranch I have been dreaming about, but I want to build it with you. I want us to be partners, equals, building something together." Rebecca felt tears gathering. "Silas Quinn, are you asking me to marry you?" "I am," Silas said simply. "I love you, Rebecca. Will you be my wife?" Rebecca thought about Robert, about the life they had planned together. She thought about the woman she had been then, young and naive, thinking she had all the time in the world. She was different now, shaped by loss and hardship into someone stronger, someone who understood the value of every moment. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, I will marry you." Silas whooped with joy, pulling her into his arms and kissing her soundly. They laughed together, giddy with happiness, and Rebecca felt like she was flying. They decided to marry in October, giving themselves time to prepare but not waiting too long. Martha was thrilled and immediately began planning, despite Rebecca's protests that she wanted something simple. "Nonsense," Martha said. "You deserve a proper wedding. Let me do this for you." Rebecca's only request was that they marry at her small house rather than in town. "That is where Robert and I started our life together," she explained to Silas. "I want to honor that, even as I start a new life with you." "I understand," Silas said. We can plant flowers on his grave before the ceremony if you like. I want him to be part of this in whatever way feels right to you." Rebecca loved him even more for that understanding. The morning of their wedding, she and Silas went to the small cemetery on the edge of town. Rebecca placed a bouquet of wildflowers on Robert's grave, and Silas stood back respectfully. "I will always love you," Rebecca whispered to the headstone. "You were my first love, and you taught me what it means to be loved. I hope you can be happy for me now. I think you would like Silas. He is a good man, like you were." She felt Silas's hand on her shoulder, offering silent comfort. Together, they stood for a moment in quiet remembrance, then turned and walked toward their future. The wedding was small but beautiful. Martha had decorated Rebecca's house with fall flowers, and a traveling preacher, Martha knew, agreed to perform the ceremony. The guests were few: Martha and Daniel, the ranch hands, a couple of neighbors, and Mr. Hutchins from the general store, who had apologized repeatedly for trying to cheat Rebecca on the tools. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress that brought out the green in her hazel eyes, and Silas looked handsome in his best suit, his dark hair slicked back. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Silas kissed her with a tenderness that made Rebecca's heart soar. The celebration afterward was joyful, with food and dancing and laughter. Tommy played the fiddle and couples whirled around Rebecca's small yard. When Silas took Rebecca in his arms for a dance, she felt complete in a way she had not felt since Robert's death. "Happy," Silas murmured against her ear. "Incredibly," Rebecca replied. "You, more than I ever thought possible." As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Martha pulled Rebecca aside. "You deserve this happiness," she said firmly. "Do not let anyone make you feel otherwise." "I will not," Rebecca promised. "Thank you for everything, Martha. You have been like family to me." "You are family now," Martha said, hugging her tightly. "And Silas too, do not be strangers." Finally, the last guest departed and Silas and Rebecca were alone. The house felt different somehow, charged with new possibility. This was no longer the house she had shared with Robert. It was the house where she and Silas would begin their life together. Silas seemed to sense her thoughts. "We can move if you want," he said quietly. "Start fresh somewhere else." Rebecca considered this, then shook her head. "No, I think we should stay here for now. This house has good memories and we will make new ones. When we have saved enough to buy land for your ranch, for our ranch, then we will build something new together." "Our ranch," Silas repeated, smiling. "I like the sound of that." That night, they lay together in the darkness, talking in whispers about their plans and dreams. Silas wanted to raise cattle and horses. Rebecca wanted a big garden, chickens, maybe goats. They would need to save money, but with both of them working, it was possible. "Maybe in a year or two." "What about children?" Silas asked hesitantly. "Do you want more children?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "I do, but I am also scared. What if something happens? What if everything goes wonderfully?" Silas interrupted gently. "We cannot live in fear of what might happen. We have to trust that we will face whatever comes together." "Together," Rebecca repeated. "I am not alone anymore." "You are never going to be alone again," Silas promised. "I am here and I am not going anywhere." The first months of their marriage were a period of adjustment and joy. They settled into shared routines, learning each other's habits and quirks. Silas was methodical and patient, thoughtful in all things. Rebecca was more impulsive, quick to make decisions but also quick to laugh. They balanced each other well. Rebecca continued working at the Patterson Ranch 3 days a week, and Silas kept his job as a ranch hand. They saved every penny they could spare, planning for their future. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the valley, talking about the land they would buy, the house they would build. "I want a big porch," Rebecca said one evening. wide enough for chairs and maybe a swing, so we can sit outside on summer evenings and watch our children play." "Our children," Silas said softly. "That sounds good." 3 months after their wedding, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. She told Silas one evening after dinner, nervous about his reaction. But he swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "Careful," she gasped. "You will make me dizzy." "I am already dizzy," Silas said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "Rebecca, we are going to have a baby, a baby. Are you happy?" Rebecca asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "I am terrified and thrilled and so incredibly happy," Silas said. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this gift." Martha was delighted when they told her the news, immediately fussing over Rebecca and insisting she rest more. "You are working too hard," Martha scolded. "I will not have you exhausting yourself." "I am pregnant, not ill," Rebecca protested, but she was touched by Martha's concern. As the months passed and Rebecca's belly grew, Silas became even more protective. He built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it until it was smooth as glass. He painted the house inside and out, repaired every loose board, made sure everything was perfect for their baby's arrival. Rebecca watched him work with a full heart. This was the man who had given her back her husband's tools, who had given her hope when she had been drowning in grief. Now he was building a cradle for their child, creating a future she had once thought impossible. In June of 1885, a little over a year after Robert's death, Rebecca gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and hard, but Martha was there coaching her through it, and when it was over, Rebecca held her son in her arms and wept with joy. Silas came in when Martha called him, his face pale with worry. But when he saw Rebecca holding their baby, his expression transformed into pure wonder. "A son," Rebecca said softly. "We have a son." Silas sat carefully on the edge of the bed, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Rebecca, thank you." They named him Samuel Robert Quinn, honoring both Silas's father and Rebecca's first husband. It felt right to acknowledge the past even as they embraced the future. Martha stayed with them for a week, helping with the baby and the house. "You two are naturals," she said, watching Silas walk the floor with Samuel, rocking him gently. "That baby is lucky to have you." "We are the lucky ones," Rebecca said, and she meant it. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, Rebecca and Silas continued saving for their dream. It took longer than they had hoped, but in the spring of 1887, 3 years after their first meeting, they finally had enough money saved to buy land. Daniel Patterson helped them find a property about 5 miles from Porterville, 200 acres of prime grazing land with a creek running through it. It was not much by California standards, but it was theirs. Silas and Rebecca stood on their land for the first time, Samuel toddling between them, and Rebecca felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "We did," Silas agreed, pulling her close. "And this is just the beginning." They built a modest house first, then a barn. Silas bought cattle with money he had saved, and Rebecca started her garden and chicken coop. It was hard work, exhausting and sometimes frustrating, but they did it together. Tommy, who had become a good friend, came to help when he could. Martha and Daniel visited often, bringing gifts and advice. Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again in the fall of 1887. Their daughter was born in May of 1888, a tiny red-faced girl with Silas's gray-blue eyes. They named her Sarah Emma Quinn, honoring Silas's first wife and daughter. "Are you sure?" Silas asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I do not want you to feel like you are competing with their memory." "I am not competing," Rebecca said gently. "I am honoring them. They were part of you, and that makes them part of our family story." Sarah and Emma should be remembered. Silas held his daughter and cried, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for understanding." The years passed in a blur of work and joy and the everyday challenges of building a life. Samuel grew tall and strong, fascinated by horses like his father. Sarah was quieter, preferring books and drawing, reminding Rebecca of herself at that age. In 1891, they welcomed another son, James Daniel Quinn, named for Silas's brother who had died young and Daniel Patterson. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Silas proved to be an excellent cattleman, and Rebecca's chickens and eggs became popular in Porterville. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Martha and Daniel remained close friends, practically family. When Daniel died in 1893 of a heart attack, Martha sold the ranch and moved into a smaller house in Porterville. She spent much of her time at the Quinn Ranch, doting on the children and helping Rebecca with canning and sewing. "You saved my life," Martha told Rebecca one afternoon as they shelled peas together on the porch. "After Daniel died, I did not know what to do with myself, but having you all being part of your family, it gives me purpose." "You are family," Rebecca said firmly. "You always will be." One evening in the summer of 1895, 11 years after that day when Rebecca had sold Robert's tools, she and Silas sat on their porch watching the sunset. Samuel was 16 now, already taller than his father, and talking about starting his own herd. Sarah was 7, reading a book in the fading light. James was 4, chasing fireflies in the yard with shrieks of delight. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Rebecca asked quietly. "If you had not bought those tools, if you had not given them back?" "All the time," Silas admitted. "I think about what my life would be like without you, and it terrifies me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rebecca. You and our children, this life we have built. I would not trade it for anything." Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder. "I loved Robert," she said. "I will always love him, but I love you too, Silas, differently but just as deeply. You taught me that the heart can hold multiple loves without diminishing any of them." "He was a good man," Silas said. "I wish I could have met him, thanked him for taking care of you when I could not." "I think he would have liked you," Rebecca said. "I think he would be glad that you are the one who found me when I needed someone most." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Rebecca thought about that desperate woman who had stood in her workshop, packing up her husband's tools with shaking hands. She had thought her life was over, that everything worth having had been buried with Robert, but life had surprised her. It had brought her Silas, had given her a second chance at love and happiness. It had taught her that grief and joy could coexist, that honoring the past did not mean being trapped by it. "I am glad you were kind," Rebecca said suddenly. "That day in the general store, you could have just bought the tools and kept them, but you saw me, really saw me, and you chose kindness. That changed everything." "You changed everything," Silas corrected gently. "You were strong enough to accept help when you needed it, brave enough to open your heart again. That took courage, Rebecca, more courage than I think you realize." Rebecca smiled, watching James catch a firefly and hold it cupped in his small hands, his face illuminated by its gentle glow. "We were both brave," she said. "We both chose to try again even when it was scary. That is what made the difference." As darkness fell and the children came inside, Rebecca and Silas remained on the porch a while longer. The ranch stretched around them, a testament to their hard work and shared dreams. In the barn, the cattle shifted and settled for the night. In the chicken coop, the hens roosted. In the garden, vegetables grew in neat rows, waiting to be harvested. And in the workshop that Silas had built behind their house, Robert O'Brien's tools hung on the wall, carefully maintained and still used. They had been the catalyst for everything, the bridge between grief and hope. Rebecca was glad they had returned to her, glad they had stayed. They were a reminder of where she had been and how far she had come. Years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Samuel grew into a fine young man, serious and hard-working like his father. At 19, he began courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a spirited girl named Alice who could rope a calf as well as any cowboy. Silas and Rebecca watched their son fall in love and remembered their own unlikely beginning. Sarah, at 11, was already showing signs of being a talented artist. She filled sketchbooks with drawings of horses, the landscape, her family. Rebecca found a teacher in Porterville willing to give her lessons, and Sarah blossomed under the attention. James, now 8, was the wild card of the family, fearless and adventurous, always climbing trees or racing his pony across the fields. He gave his parents gray hairs but also endless laughter. In 1898, Rebecca and Silas celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary. Martha organized a party at their ranch, inviting friends from all over the area. As Rebecca looked around at the crowd of people eating, drinking, and celebrating, she was struck by how full her life had become. She had friends, family, a thriving ranch, beautiful children. She had love. Silas found her standing alone for a moment watching the festivities. "Happy?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "Beyond measure," Rebecca replied. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life." "Believe it," Silas said, kissing her temple. "You deserve every bit of it." That night, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Rebecca pulled out the book of Emily Dickinson poems Silas had given her all those years ago. It was worn now, the pages soft from repeated reading. She opened it to one of her favorite poems and read aloud to Silas as they lay in bed. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all." "Hope," Silas repeated thoughtfully. "Is that what we have?" "That is what you gave me," Rebecca said. "When I had lost everything, when I could not see a way forward, you gave me hope. You showed me that life could still be good, that love could still exist. That was the real gift, not the tools. Hope." Silas pulled her closer. "You gave me the same thing. I had been surviving, but I was not living. You taught me to live again." In 1899, Samuel married Alice in a beautiful ceremony at the Quinn Ranch. Rebecca cried through the entire event, overwhelmed with joy and the bittersweet realization that her eldest was beginning his own journey. Samuel and Alice built a small house on the edge of the Quinn property, and Samuel began running his own small herd with his father's support. By 1900, the new century had arrived, and with it came changes. Porterville was growing, becoming more modern. There was talk of bringing the railroad through, of new businesses opening. The Wild West of Silas and Rebecca's youth was slowly fading into something more settled, more civilized. But on the Quinn Ranch, life continued much as it always had. The cattle still needed tending, the garden still needed weeding, the children still needed raising. Sarah, now 13, had decided she wanted to go to art school in San Francisco someday. James, at 10, announced he was going to be a bronc rider in rodeos. Silas and Rebecca navigated these pronouncements with patience and understanding, knowing their children had to find their own paths. In the spring of 1901, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again, much to her surprise. At 41 years old, she had assumed her childbearing days were behind her. But there it was, undeniable and overwhelming. "Another baby," Silas said, his face a mixture of joy and concern. "Are you all right with this? I know you are older now and it can be more difficult." "I am fine," Rebecca assured him, though privately she shared his concerns. "Women have been having babies at my age since time began. I will be fine." The pregnancy was indeed harder than her previous ones. Rebecca tired more easily, and there were days when she felt every one of her 41 years. But Martha was there to help, and Sarah proved surprisingly capable of managing the household when her mother needed rest. In December of 1901, Rebecca gave birth to their fourth child, another girl. The labor was long and frightening, and there were moments when Rebecca feared she might not survive. But Martha and the doctor coached her through it, and finally, miraculously, the baby arrived. She was small but healthy, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that proved she had no trouble making her presence known. They named her Martha Rose Quinn, after their dear friend and after Robert's mother. Martha cried when she learned the baby's name. "You did not have to do that," she said, holding tiny Martha Rose with trembling hands. "Yes, we did," Rebecca said weakly from the bed. "You have been like a mother to me, Martha. It is only fitting." As Rebecca recovered from the birth, she reflected on the strange and wonderful path her life had taken. 18 years ago, she had been a desperate widow selling her husband's tools just to survive. Now she was a mother of 4, co-owner of a successful ranch, married to a man she loved more than she had thought possible. The tools that had started everything still hung in the workshop, a silent witness to the family's history. Sometimes Silas would use them for repairs, and every time he did, he would think about that day in the general store when he had made a decision that changed his life. Buying those tools and giving them back had been an impulse born of compassion, nothing more. He never could have predicted where it would lead. The years of the early 1900s brought more changes. Samuel and Alice had their first child in 1902, making Silas and Rebecca grandparents. Samuel Robert Quinn Jr. was a beautiful baby, and Rebecca was surprised by how powerfully her heart responded to this new little life. Being a grandmother was different than being a mother, but equally wonderful. Sarah left for art school in San Francisco in 1904, much to her parents' mingled pride and sadness. She wrote letters home faithfully, describing her classes, her new friends, the exciting city. Rebecca missed her daughter terribly but was glad Sarah was pursuing her dreams. James, true to his word, began entering local rodeos at 16. He was fearless and talented, winning more often than not. Silas worried constantly about injuries, but Rebecca reminded him that they had raised their children to be independent, to chase what made them happy. They could not protect them from everything. Little Martha Rose grew into a bright, curious child, asking endless questions about everything. She followed her father everywhere, wanting to know how things worked, why animals behaved certain ways, what made the sky blue. Silas answered her patiently, delighting in her inquisitive nature. In 1907, Martha died peacefully in her sleep at 73 years old. Her death hit the entire Quinn family hard. She had been a constant presence in their lives for over 20 years, a source of wisdom, love, and support. They buried her in the Porterville Cemetery, not far from Robert O'Brien's grave. At the funeral, Rebecca stood between Silas and little Martha Rose, tears streaming down her face. "She was the best friend I ever had," Rebecca said. "I do not know how to say goodbye." "You do not have to say goodbye," Silas said gently. "She is part of you, part of all of us. That never goes away." The loss of Martha reminded Rebecca of her own mortality. She was 47 now, and while she was still healthy and strong, she knew her time was finite. It made her more determined than ever to appreciate every moment, to tell the people she loved how much they meant to her. "I love you," she told Silas one evening as they sat on their porch, the same porch where they had sat hundreds of times before. "I need you to know that. Every day I love you." "I love you too," Silas said, taking her hand. "You are my miracle, Rebecca. You gave me a life I never thought I would have again." Samuel and Alice had 3 more children by 1910, giving Silas and Rebecca a total of 4 grandchildren. Samuel had expanded his herd and was doing well, proving himself to be an excellent rancher. Silas watched his son with pride, seeing his own best qualities reflected and magnified. Sarah returned from art school in 1908 with a degree and a commission to paint murals for a bank in Sacramento. She was making a name for herself as an artist, and while she did not live on the ranch anymore, she visited often and always considered it home. James continued to rodeo, traveling throughout California and winning championships. At 20, he was being called one of the best bronc riders in the state. He had also caught the eye of a rancher's daughter in Bakersfield, and romance seemed to be blooming. Martha Rose, now 9 years old, was attending school in Porterville and proving to be an excellent student. Her teacher said she had the mind of a scientist, always wanting to understand the why and how of everything. In 1912, Silas and Rebecca celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary. It was a quiet celebration, just the 2 of them and Martha Rose, who had made them a card decorated with pressed flowers. Samuel and his family came for dinner, and Sarah sent a beautiful watercolor painting of the ranch from Sacramento. James telegraphed congratulations from Arizona, where he was competing in a rodeo. As they sat on the porch that evening, Rebecca thought about all the anniversaries they had celebrated, all the moments big and small that had made up their life together. There had been hardships, certainly. Years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. Illnesses that had frightened them. The normal struggles of raising children and running a ranch. But through it all, they had faced everything together. 2 people who had been broken by loss and had somehow found a way to be whole again. "Do you ever regret it?" Rebecca asked suddenly. "Giving me those tools instead of keeping them. You could have used them yourself, saved that money." Silas laughed. "Not even for a second. Best $50 I ever spent. It brought me you." "You could have just kept the tools and still helped me," Rebecca pointed out. "But then I would have been just another person pitying the poor widow," Silas said. "Giving them back, that was different. That was treating you like someone who deserved dignity and choice. And it gave me an excuse to see you again, to keep talking to you. Maybe I was smarter than I thought." Rebecca smiled, leaning against him. "You were very smart, are very smart. After all, you married me." "The smartest thing I ever did," Silas agreed. In 1914, James married his sweetheart, a lovely young woman named Catherine. The wedding was held at her family's ranch near Bakersfield, and the entire Quinn family made the journey. It was the first time in years they had all been together, and Rebecca treasured every moment. World War I broke out that same year, and while it seemed very far away, its effects rippled even to their corner of California. James, always the adventurer, talked about enlisting, but Catherine was expecting their first child and he decided to stay home. Rebecca was grateful. She had already lost one husband to illness. She could not bear the thought of losing a child to war. The years continued their steady march. More grandchildren were born. The ranch prospered, survived droughts and economic downturns, adapted to new technologies. Trucks began to replace horses for some tasks. Electricity came to Porterville in 1918, and Silas had their house wired so Rebecca could have electric lights. "No more trimming lamps," Rebecca said in wonder the first night, flipping the switch and watching the room flood with light. Robert would have loved this. She still thought about Robert sometimes, though the pain had long since faded to a gentle melancholy. He was part of her history, a chapter that had ended so that a new one could begin. She was grateful for the years she had shared with him, grateful for what he had taught her about love. That foundation had made it possible for her to love again, to love Silas with her whole heart. In 1920, Martha Rose graduated from high school at the top of her class. She had been accepted to the University of California, where she planned to study biology. She was the first person in the Quinn family to attend university, and both Silas and Rebecca were bursting with pride. "Our baby is all grown up," Rebecca said, watching Martha Rose pack for her journey to Berkeley. "She is," Silas agreed. "We raised them well, Rebecca, all of them. They are good people." "We did it together," Rebecca reminded him. "Everything we did together." That summer, Samuel took over full management of the ranch. Silas was 62 now, still strong but starting to feel his age. The years of hard physical labor had taken their toll, and arthritis was making itself known in his hands and knees. He and Rebecca agreed it was time to step back a bit, let the younger generation take the lead. They kept the house and a small portion of the land for themselves, enough to have a garden and some chickens, but nothing that required extensive labor. It felt strange at first, having so much free time after decades of constant work. But gradually they adjusted. Rebecca took up reading again with a passion, going through books the way some people went through meals. Silas built birdhouses and sold them in town, discovering he enjoyed woodworking. They took walks together every evening when the weather allowed, exploring the land they had worked so hard to tame. "We have earned this," Rebecca said one evening as they walked hand in hand through a meadow filled with wildflowers. "We worked hard for 40 years. We deserve to rest a bit." "I am not ready to be put out to pasture yet," Silas protested, but he was smiling. "Not pasture," Rebecca corrected. "Just a different phase. We are grandparents now, old folks. That is allowed to be different than being young folks breaking their backs building a ranch." By 1925, Silas and Rebecca had been married 41 years. Rebecca was 65 years old, Silas 67. Their hair was gray, their hands gnarled with age, their bodies bent from years of labor, but their love had not diminished. If anything, it had deepened, tempered by time and shared experience into something unbreakable. They had 8 grandchildren now, with another on the way. Sarah had married an art professor and lived in San Francisco with their 2 children. James and Catherine had 4 children and ran a successful ranch near Bakersfield. Martha Rose had graduated from university and was working as a research assistant at a laboratory in San Francisco, studying plant biology. Samuel's oldest son, Samuel Jr., was now 23 and helping his father run the original Quinn Ranch. The young man reminded Rebecca so much of Silas, it sometimes took her breath away. The same quiet competence, the same steady reliability. One autumn evening in 1925, Rebecca and Silas sat on their porch as the sun set. It was late October, and the air had that crisp quality that promised winter was coming. Rebecca was wrapped in a shawl, Silas in a heavy coat. "You remember the first time we sat here together?" Rebecca asked. "I do," Silas said. "You had just agreed to marry me. We were planning our future." "That was 41 years ago." Rebecca shook her head in wonder. "Where did the time go? Into a life well lived," Silas said. "Into children and grandchildren, hard work and good times, all the moments big and small that make up a life. I would not change a single moment of it." Rebecca turned to look at him, this man who had given her back her life when she thought it was over. His face was deeply lined now, his hair completely white, but his eyes were still that same striking gray-blue, still looking at her with the same love and warmth they always had. "I need to tell you something," she said seriously. Silas's expression shifted to concern. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Rebecca assured him. "I just need you to know that these 41 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. You saved me, Silas, not just by giving me money for those tools, but by seeing me as a person worthy of love and respect when I could not see that in myself. You gave me a reason to keep living when I wanted to give up. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You gave me everything." Silas's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Rebecca, you saved me too. I was hollow before you, just going through the motions. You filled my life with meaning again. You made me want to be better, to build something lasting. Everything good I have is because of you." They kissed, a gentle press of lips that spoke of decades of love and intimacy. When they parted, they sat together in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the last light fade from the sky. In the distance, they could hear Samuel's children playing, their voices carrying on the evening breeze. Lights were beginning to appear in the houses dotting the valley. Somewhere a dog barked. The world continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to one couple's moment of perfect contentment. But for Rebecca and Silas Quinn, former widow and lonely cowboy, two broken people who had found a way to be whole together, this moment was everything. They had built a life from loss and hardship. They had turned tragedy into triumph, grief into hope. They had loved fiercely and well, had raised children and built a legacy that would outlast them. And it had all started with a crate of tools, an act of unexpected kindness, and two hearts brave enough to try again. As the years rolled forward into the late 1920s, Silas and Rebecca settled even more deeply into the gentle rhythms of their later years. They attended church on Sundays, hosted family dinners on holidays, tended their modest garden, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of a life well lived. Their children and grandchildren visited often, filling the house with noise and laughter. Rebecca loved watching the younger generations interact, seeing how her family had grown and spread like roots from a strong tree. Every child and grandchild carried pieces of her and Silas forward into the future. Sometimes, usually late at night when neither could sleep, Silas and Rebecca would talk about the early days, about Robert and about Sarah and Emma, the loves they had lost. They spoke without pain now, with affection and gratitude for what those relationships had taught them. "You think they would approve?" Rebecca asked one night. "Robert and Sarah, if they could see us now." "I think they would be glad we found each other," Silas said. "Real love does not seek to trap people in grief. It wants them to be happy." "I hope they are together somewhere," Rebecca mused. "Robert and Sarah and little Emma. I hope they are all at peace." "I believe they are," Silas said. "And I believe they are happy we found peace too." In the spring of 1928, Silas fell ill. It started as a simple cough but developed into pneumonia. At 70 years old, his body did not fight infection the way it once had. The doctor came every day, and Samuel moved into the house to help Rebecca care for his father. For 3 weeks, Silas fought. Rebecca barely left his side, holding his hand, reading to him, talking to him even when he was too weak to respond. She had nursed Robert through his final illness, and the parallels were not lost on her, but she refused to give up hope. Slowly, miraculously, Silas began to improve. His fever broke, his breathing eased, and color returned to his face. By early summer, he was back on his feet, weakened but alive. "You are not getting rid of me that easily," he told Rebecca with a weak smile. "You better not even think about leaving me," Rebecca said fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "We have more years ahead of us yet, Silas Quinn." And they did have more years, though both were acutely aware of their mortality now. They made a point to say, "I love you" every day, to not waste time on petty arguments, to appreciate every moment they had together. In 1930, they celebrated their 46th wedding anniversary surrounded by their entire family. It was a grand affair, with children and grandchildren traveling from all over California. Even Martha Rose, who rarely left her laboratory, made the journey. As Rebecca looked around at the sea of faces, at all the people who existed because she and Silas had found each other, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was her legacy, not just the children she had borne, but the love she had shared, the kindness she had spread, the family she had helped create. That night, exhausted but happy, she and Silas sat alone on their porch one last time. The stars were brilliant overhead, the night air warm and sweet with the scent of summer flowers. "It has been a good life," Rebecca said softly. "A very good life." "The best," Silas agreed. "I would not change a single thing. Not even buying those tools," Rebecca teased. "You could have saved $50. "Especially not that," Silas said. "Best investment I ever made. It bought me everything worth having." Rebecca leaned against him, feeling his heart beat steady and strong beneath her ear. This man, this good and decent man, had loved her for 46 years. Had given her a life beyond anything she could have imagined that terrible day when she had stood in her workshop, preparing to sell the last pieces of her dead husband's legacy. Silas had taken those tools and given them back, but he had also given her so much more. Hope, purpose, love, a future. Everything, and she had given him the same things in return. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting. Together, they had proved that even after devastating loss, life could bloom again. Love could bloom again. As they sat together under the stars, holding hands the way they had for nearly half a century, Rebecca and Silas Quinn knew they had been blessed. Not because their life had been easy. It had not been. But because they had faced it together. Two people who understood the fragility of happiness and cherished it all the more because of that understanding. The tools still hung in Samuel's workshop now, carefully maintained and still used. Robert O'Brien's legacy lived on not just in those tools, but in the family they had helped create. Everything was connected, the past flowing into the present, loss making space for new love. And on a quiet ranch in Porterville, California, two people who had been saved by an act of kindness sat together in the darkness, grateful beyond measure for the life they had built from the ashes of grief. Their story was proof that even the smallest gesture of compassion could change everything, that love could bloom in the most unlikely places, and that the human heart was capable of containing more joy and pain and hope than anyone could imagine. It was a story without a villain, without grand drama, just two ordinary people who had lived and loved and built a life together one day at a time. And in the end, that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.